Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are shifting gears now. We have a guest in the studio. Quentin Rhoades is with us. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be here, as always.
Yes. Now,
Quentin, you might remember from some of the past discussions we've had. Today, he's in the studio as an attorney representing Josh Clark, who's filed a complaint against Sheriff T.J. McDermott, a complaint which we haven't read, Peter or I, and a complaint which I don't think most people know much about, other than what they've learned through our last week's discussion and all of the hullabaloo that went over with the other
Dominic, yeah.
Mr. Dominic's complaint. So shifting gears, now that Quentin's back from his trip, tell us a little bit about Josh Clark's complaint, if you would.
Well, you know, it's not unlike Captain Dominic's. He's in a much different position than Captain Dominic. And I'm just looking at the complaint. We dated it back March 10th of 2015, so it's been pending since that time. There has been time for the county to respond and for us to reply. And then the county served the Human Rights Bureau with a document I haven't seen, which is a SIR reply that is not, it's sort of unconventional. It's not provided for under the rules, and it's typical that we would get a copy of that. But I haven't seen that yet.
No, what is a SIR complaint?
Reply to our response. Well, put it this way: the rules provide for when a complaint is filed, then the respondent gets 30 days to respond.
Sure.
And then we also get an opportunity to reply to that response. And
then, what is all this for? What is the response and the reply? What is it all about?
Well, it sets up the factual allegations of, you know, what we allege the sheriff did in order to retaliate against and to.
So it's kind of setting the ground rules for the future complaint discussion?
Well, it's the factual allegations of what actually happened.
Okay.
So, you know, it's the facts that we think we could prove through witnesses and documentation, and it's the facts that are supposed to be investigated by the Human Rights Bureau and, you know, some sort of a determination of whether there's good cause to believe those things actually happened.
Now, let me ask you, and again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't even play one on TV, and I haven't stayed at the Holiday Inn Express. But anyway, what is the difference between a human rights complaint and a civil lawsuit?
Well, the civil lawsuit is filed in the district court, and, you know, you have a right to a jury trial for the findings of fact. And
and that's what Paige Pavillon did, right?
That's what she's filed.
All right.
And the procedures are substantially different. The legislature has adopted the Human Rights Code that allows for or imposes upon people, depending on how you look at it, this administrative process that you have to go through before you have a right to go to the district court.
Okay.
And in that process, it's designed to aid people in particular who don't have access to attorneys. And it's something that you're supposed to be able to just fill it out on your own, send it in, and the Human Rights Bureau would do a lot of the legal and investigative work for you. And the policy behind that is, you know, the civil arena, the civil law arena is supposed to be fighting over money. And oftentimes in the Human Rights Bureau, there's not a lot of money at stake. Someone's been discriminated against, but it hasn't cost them that much out of pocket. They can't afford to hire a lawyer because they don't have the resources, or even if they had the resources, there's not enough economic value at stake to worry about it. So the legislature has put this administrative board out there to combat discrimination, even if a lot of money is not on the line.
Who is on this board? In other words, who is the Human Rights Commission? Are there people that were selected by the governor, by the legislature? What?
I don't want to seem pejorative when I say they're bureaucrats, but they're career civil servants,
okay.
if you prefer.
Our audience has high respect for bureaucrats, so I'm sure they won't be offended at all.
Well, you know, they do an important job. You know, sometimes we wonder at how they might do it, but I don't want to use that in a pejorative sense. They are investigators who go out and, you know, when we have someone who's alleged to have been discriminated against, sometimes that hasn't happened. The employer or the respondent is exonerated by the Human Rights Bureau, and sometimes it has happened, or there's sufficient evidence to believe that it has happened, and they make a finding that, you know, we talked to these witnesses and this is what we learned, and this is how we think it should be resolved. And so it's designed to be, you know, an alternative dispute resolution.
Now, let me ask you this. The media has come under fire recently, especially over Captain Dominic's complaint. that that somehow we got a hold of this complaint before the investigation, because the criticism that was aimed at the press is that, there's all this media coverage before an investigator even hits the ground, comes to Missoula to begin asking questions, and that somehow may muddy the waters or perhaps inflame the passions of what's going on. Is it okay if that happens, or who can release that material? Is it the person who filed the complaint? If they want to bring it to the media, they can, or is there some sort of thing set up where they're not allowed to do that, or what?
Well, the rule is that if you have a complaint, you have a First Amendment right to say what you want, but you're not prohibited by the rules to release whatever documents that you've filed with the Human Rights Bureau. You can choose to, or you can choose not to. Now, if no one has done that and the news media learns of it and requests independently of the Human Rights Bureau, then they go through a process of asking the parties if there's an objection, and then if there's no objection, they'll release that. If there is an objection, then they'll deal with it. It may or may not be something that...
They ask both sides?
They'll ask both sides.
It's kind of like a Freedom of Information Act request?
Well, there's two aspects to it. It's not technically a Freedom of Information Act request. It is a public document. And those documents that are filed with the Human Rights Bureau, especially when you're alleging wrongdoing by a government official, are public documents. But there's still a process that the news media has to go through to get that permission, so that people are at least aware of the fact that the news media is requesting it.
But if the complainant, brings it to the media and says, "Here, this is for you." I mean, do we have to go to the other party and say, "Is it okay for us to publish this," or we have permission once they've given us permission?
Well, the rules don't provide for prior permission under those circumstances. If you've authored it, you can distribute it however you wish.
All right.
Under the rules, and that, of course, under the First Amendment, that makes sense too. I mean,
right. Sure.
Even if they had a rule against that, it probably wouldn't be enforceable.
Right.
We have a First Amendment, right?
Hey, listen, we
wondering more and more these days.
We have a break.
Yeah. And we give you First Amendment rights, but we also give you free coffee.
Yeah.
Actually, we don't give any of that stuff. Rocket Coffee gives the coffee. God gives you the rights. Give us a call at 721-1290, and we'll give you your coffee and your free toast and your choice of spread. First person to call, 721-1290, gets the coffee from the Rocket Coffee stand over in the Garden City Garden Supply.
Hey, we're back on Talkback. Yeah, it's a gorgeous day here in western Montana. Not quite a record high. We had a record high yesterday, in case you're wondering. John King's over there. Quentin Rhoades joining us here in studio, attorney at law. We've been talking about the difference between a Human Rights Bureau complaint and a civil lawsuit, and we appreciate Quentin pointing out the differences there. So.
And although these HR complaints are kind of supposed to not be about money, there are still settlements, as we learned with T.J. McDermott's own complaint, right? Where they settled
and it's not that they're not about money. It's about that oftentimes they're not about money, and oftentimes they are about money. But under Montana's wrongful discharge statute, there's not money that can be had by a wrongfully discharged party. It's just there's not much there, and so it's difficult for them to persuade lawyers to represent them on a contingency fee, because there's just not much there to be had for a fee for the lawyer. It's difficult for them to justify hiring their own lawyer when they are not that. They may be out of pocket a great deal, but the law doesn't allow them to recover much when that's wrongful. And so you don't have a lot of these wrongful discharge complaints. On the other hand, in the Human Rights Bureau, you have a different procedure and different substantive law that does allow you to recover for emotional distress caused by some sort of wrongful discrimination. And so, that's when the money usually becomes an issue.
So tell us what the heart of the complaint is in Josh Clark's case.
Well, in Josh Clark's case, there are two main allegations. One is political discrimination, and the other is retaliation. And what happened with Clark is that when he lost the election, he was expected by the winning party to retire. And he decided not to do that. He wanted to work for another 5 years. He had a retirement plan in place, kids in school, that sort of thing. And he didn't want to retire. And so there was. It appears that there was an incompatible set of circumstances for the sheriff. And so what he did was.
Why?
And I'm not sure what's motivating him on that. One of the things that we can see here in in the sheriff's treatment of these people who oppose him in the campaign is they all seem to have gotten similar sort of treatment, which is either retaliation or demotion or both. With respect to Captain Dominic, with Josh Clark, certainly, and I think what we've alleged and what I think we can prove is that this pattern is directed at a set of people who opposed the sheriff in the election. It's not fair to say it's the Keystone Cops and they just don't know what they're doing. I think they know exactly what they're doing, and I think that's why you wind up with these demotions and other negative consequences for this set of people. So it's not at random.
Tell us the tenor of the retaliation. As a reporter, we cover what goes on at the sheriff's office. I didn't even know Josh Clark had left the force there till sometime later. We now know pretty well what happened with Mike Dominic's case from our discussion last week.
And I did see the very brief paragraphs on Josh Clark resigned from the sheriff's office.
Right, that's about it. So what happened in between the time of the election and the resignation that would fit into that title that you just said of retaliation?
Well, and this was reported somewhat in the Missoulian, but what happened was that Josh was the undersheriff, and he had been the captain of professional standards. And there's a statute that provides when an undersheriff is, when a new sheriff comes into office, the undersheriff is supposed to go back to his old position. And that has been the tradition in the Missoula County Sheriff's Office, is that everybody who's ever served as undersheriff at the end of their term as undersheriff has either retired because they reached a decision to retire, because it was their time to retire, or they decided to retire. They weren't forced into retirement, in other words, but they've either retired, but the vast majority of these folks who've served as undersheriff has gone back to their own position, whether that be as a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, whatever that might be, even if they've run against the sheriff and lost. And that's consistent with the statute, and it's consistent with the public policy. What the legislature has put in place is that in the old days, when a new sheriff came into office, all the deputies, undersheriff and all the deputies, were replaced. And with the professionalization of the force, it's obvious that that's not a good idea.
You lose all your institutional knowledge, for one thing, right?
Exactly. With the modernization of policing and that sort of thing, it's a long time ago it was decided that, we're going to keep our deputy sheriffs in office. And the undersheriff we're going to keep in office as well, but not as undersheriff. We're going to put him back in his or her in the old position that they occupied prior to taking the undersheriff position. And the public policy behind that is twofold. First, it's that professionalization. And second, you want the good, experienced, trained, respected leaders to be willing to take the undersheriff job. And with the confidence that if they do, they won't be retaliated against when a new sheriff comes into office. That you want those senior leaders to be willing to take that job, so to help the new sheriffs. And because the sheriff can be a civilian, they don't have to have any law enforcement experience whatsoever, or they can be have little experience or little training. And so you want them to be in a position to be able to select from their senior leadership the undersheriff that they want, and that undersheriff can have confidence that at the end of the sheriff's term, they'll go back to their old job.
You said the word tradition a lot. Is it just a tradition, like something that we do, but it doesn't have any legal constraints about it?
Well, it's evidence of what the statute means. There's two forms of evidence of what the statute means. One is, what does it say? Which makes it very clear that you can't demote the undersheriff below where he was before. And second, you look at, how people have acted. How have they interpreted it? And since the mind of man remembereth not to the contrary, this has always been the case. And so both we have the statute and what it says, and the people and how they act. And now we have a new precedent, right? We have a new precedent that says, if you're undersheriff, you may very well go back to the lowest position on the force if we have a new sheriff in place. And that's something brand new to Missoula County, and it's brand new for the state of Montana if you read that statute.
Okay, so, we're up against a break, and Catherine, we're going to get your call on here in just a moment. We have two lines open. Quentin Rhoades joining us here in studio, learning some fascinating legal things about what's been going on with the Sheriff's Department. So if you have a question or comment, give us a call, 721-1290. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Talkback, 721-1290 is our number. John King's over there. I'm Peter Christian. Joining us in studio, Quentin Rhoades, attorney at law. Let's get to the phone. And our good friend Catherine is with us. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning. Just a quick question, or a series of questions, actually. What would it take to make him whole? What would constitute a successful outcome for this action?
Let's start there, and then we'll go to the next question.
Yeah, let him do that one first. Go ahead.
Well, the allegation is constructive discharge and discrimination, and so there's an aspect of that is not quantifiable, and that is, if you've been subjected to political discrimination, that's kind of a subjective thing. And what the investigators will do is recommend some compensation for that wrongdoing. For example, Sheriff McDermott's case, it was recommended that he didn't have any out-of-pocket costs. He wasn't terminated, didn't receive a discharge. They said, well, $60,000 will compensate him for the emotional distress and of being discriminated against on this basis. With Captain Clark's position, Under Sheriff Clark's position, he was subjected to sufficiently difficult circumstances that he felt he had to quit, both for his own mental health and for his physical safety, just because he was out on the street without having been appropriately refreshed on some of the things that were he was expected to do out there. But in particular for his mental health, because of the humiliation that he was being subject to on a regular basis, in order to get him to retire. And so there's two aspects of it. One is the lost salary. I mean, he did wind up quitting, and he resigned back in January. And so he was going to stay on the force for another 5 years, according to his plan, and then retire. And the second aspect of it is the reduced retirement. If you retire early, you wind up with less of a retirement benefit than if you had served out to the end of whatever you had planned. And so there are two aspects of it, both the lost salary and the lost retirement benefits.
Now someone would say, well, hold on. I mean, he voluntarily retired. I mean, he said he submitted his resignation, and so would that count against him in any way, or what?
Well, that's what we call the constructive nature of the discharge. It wasn't that the sheriff came in and said, you're out. What the sheriff did was demote him and humiliate him in such a way as that he felt like, because of his own mental health and subjective well-being and that of his family, that he had to retire because he was going to continue to suffer this sort of treatment until he finally quit. They wanted him out, and so that's the lost salary aspect of it.
Let's get to the second question out.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Okay, I was just going to ask then, sort of concomitantly here, would he then take reinstatement at the same salary that he had before? Would he take an apology? Or would he like to see a change in the current procedure going forward? Any of those?
Well, that's something to consider. I don't think that Sheriff McDermott would probably tender his resignation as part of the program. I don't know that he would apologize. Perhaps he would. But the law doesn't require that. What the only thing that the law offers by way of remedy in a situation like this is money. And so there are a lot of things that you can do to try to mitigate circumstances like these, besides offer money, and perhaps those might be on the table at some point. They're not now, but it's something that would certainly be considered.
Obviously, the HR bureau or bureaucracy has to come up with the figure, right? But I assume that you and Josh have come up with a figure in your own minds as to what you think would be fair and reasonable. What is that figure?
Well, it's based on the lost salary for 5 years, and it's based on the reduced retirement for actuarially, we estimated how long he would live based on how long his father lived, which is another 25 years. And so we added those figures together to come up with a sum certain that we're looking for. And it's in, don't quote me on this. I don't know it down to the penny, but it's in the nature of $450,000 to $550,000.
Wow. Which would be come out of the taxpayers' pockets, right?
Absolutely. The taxpayer's representative, who the taxpayers elected, is the sheriff. The sheriff undertakes matters that result in liability for his office. The taxpayers are responsible for that. And the people who supervise him are the taxpayers. It's not the county commissioners or the mayor. There's nobody with the power to terminate him for cause except the taxpayers, the people who vote. If they decide for whatever reason they don't want him in office, such as there's too much civil liability that arises from his management practices, then they have a remedy for that, and that's to vote for somebody else. But yes, absolutely, that's the taxpayer responsibility, and that's something you just have to face up to as an electorate.
Anything else, Catherine?
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks for the call. All right.
I want to go back to the humiliation you had mentioned before. Can we get specific? Because I think a lot of people that have worked jobs, we've all had issues where maybe we had to not get a pay raise for a long time, recent long time, or anybody that lived through the recession had to face cutbacks. Shoot, I know in my past jobs things got harder.
We all here at this radio station took a 5% cut in our pay for 2 or 3 years,
and so
during the recession. So
a lot of people might have a hard time understanding this idea of humiliation. And frankly, I'm a little worried, like if all my public servants start saying they're humiliated and then they quit their jobs and then they ask the taxpayers for money, that could be a pretty bad scenario for me, Joe taxpayer. So what is the character of this humiliation for Mr. Clark?
Well, the law prohibits public officials from discriminating against or retaliating against people because of their political views. And then we're not talking about party politics, Democrat or Republican. We're talking about when somebody runs for office, they're engaging in politics. And you're either for that person and you can support them, or you're neutral, you don't have a position, or you can be against them and you can actively campaign against them. In this case, we have two people who are political opponents in the election. And what's supposed to result from that is something similar to what happened when Sheriff McMeekin won. And, he promoted his opponent to a captaincy. There's supposed to be mutual respect and this camaraderie, this professionalism that transcends the election. And, that's expected. You have a senior person like Josh Clark who's been served both with distinction, both as a city officer and as a detention officer and as a sheriff. And he's got the training and background and respect and experience. You don't put him on the night patrol, at the lowest position in the department. That's not what you do. You treat him with the respect that he's earned. And if you're treating him with disrespectfully, that undermines him in both, the tradition of service that he has honored for the length and breadth of his career, but also in the eyes of the other junior officers and the junior deputies. And so you've got a position here where no disrespect, but these folks they're not at a microphone, they're not at a desk like me. They're out in squad cars in the middle of the night, dealing with people who are suicidal, who are homicidal, or otherwise dangerous. And so, there's a different level of honor and respect that needs to be accorded to these folks because of the difficulty of the position and the fact that we ask them to put their lives on the line.
I was going to say, even more recently, Sheriff Ibsen promoted Captain Brad Gifton to captain right after Brad ran against him in a sheriff's race.
We're up against a break. 721-1290. We have all three lines open. If you want to visit with Quentin Rhoades, got a question or a comment, love to hear from you. 721-1290. We're just getting started in this whole procedure, basically. Several different complaints. We'll see. We'll have to just wait and see how they all go. We'll be right back. Hey, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is the number. That's John King. I'm Peter Christian. Joining us in studio is attorney at law Quentin Rhoades, and we're discussing all these things revolving around this, so far, at least three separate complaints against the current sheriff's administration. So,
when we read Dominic's complaint, we were both shocked. I'm pretty sure I can speak for Peter here, right? If just one page of that complaint, which is like 20 pages long, is true, then a lot of people would be shocked. In fact, even the sheriff was upset about it, even called it slanderous because he was so upset about it. There's all kinds of stuff. I mean, you could talk about the code of silence, which opens up the piece. There's all these different, the lack of a captain position being filled still, and a captain now manning a warehouse, not really doing much there. Then we have at the end of the complaint that whole issue with a particular deputy that's under suspicion for having sex in a patrol car and for pulling people over because they wanted to get a look at them because they saw them on Facebook and all kinds of crazy, salacious stuff.
It just sounds like high school yearbook or something.
And my question
it's
is...
sort of depressing.
Yeah. It's extremely depressing and concerning for, I think, everybody that lives in Missoula County and is protected by these men and women that work at the force here at the county sheriff's office. I guess my question to you is, does Josh Clark's complaint read anything like the complaint that we went through with Mike Dominic? I mean, is it a similar tenor of concern?
It's the same set of circumstances. And, that's kind of the problem, is this pattern of targeting people who are political adversaries. And, whether you're going to set up a system where if you folks, if anybody opposes my political ambitions, then they're going to expect retaliation. Well, that's one way of ensuring that there's not much opposition. I've got my career. I've been serving in the force for 10 or 15 or 20 years. I've got my retirement plan. I serve with honor and distinction. One way for me to continue in that position is not take a position when it comes to the political campaigns. And so, like I say, if this was just incompetence and there was just a random selection of people who were suffering these human resources problems and not following the rules with respect to promotions or demotions and that sort of thing, you could chalk it up to incompetence. But there's a target group here, and that's a real problem. If people are concerned about that, they have a right to be.
I want to ask you, as a taxpayer, okay, I have been watching. Ever since this really came to light, I've been watching the various news reports. Missoula does a really good job of quantifying how much money is being spent on each of these things, and sometimes it's quite substantial. And as a taxpayer, I'm thinking, at what point is everybody just going to do this? I mean, okay, well, it worked for them, it worked for them, it worked for them, it may work for me, so I'm just going to go ahead and put my complaint in there. And in other words, there'll just be this rush to, as he stepped on my foot or rolled over my foot with his chair, or, he looked at me cross-eyed, or, you know what I mean? And so I am perceiving that as discrimination in some way. How do you keep that from steamrolling through and just kind of bankrupting the whole system?
Well, focus on substance.
Okay.
If these claims are frivolous, then they'll be dismissed and disposed of without the taxpayer having to pay much of anything. Maybe a few attorney fees in disposing of these on a summary basis. If in fact the people who are in charge of investigating these claims, talking to the witnesses and looking at the documents say, yeah, there's good cause to believe there was discrimination here, then the substance of the matter is you've got a management problem. And as a taxpayer, how do you solve that? You got to wait for the next election. And it's not going to be a slippery slope if we focus on the substance. And I think the Human Rights Bureau focuses on substance. I think the courts focus on substance. I think that when a jury comes in and makes a finding, they're not just rewarding somebody because they showed up in court one day. They listened to the evidence, they looked at the documents, and they heard the arguments and read the jury instruction. And they say, well, look, this is the right outcome. We're talking about substance here. So, I think that worrying about a slippery slope is legitimate. It's wise. We don't want to be paying out settlements just because claims are made. But on the other hand, if you go through this process and at the end of the process there are findings that said things happened, then they need to be remedied. And if as a taxpayer you don't like that, then you have a remedy, and that's to replace the management.
Okay, we're up against a break, and Ray and Marilyn will try to get your calls in here in just a moment. You can make your comment on our Facebook page if you like. We're going to come right back. Stay with us. Hey, it's Talk Back, and it's Tuesday, June the 9th. Gorgeous day out there in western Montana. John King's over there. I'm Peter Christian. Quentin Rhoades joining us in the studio. Go ahead, John.
All right, Quentin's a lawyer, so he'll have fun with this. I'm going to try to give you TJ McDermott's argument because I think
before you get to that, I got a comment to make. In the last hour, you had a person who said, "Well, that's the law; it's black and white." And I have to tell you this: the law is never black and white. If it was black and white, you wouldn't have need for thousands of attorneys in Montana who all have jobs. Because the law is not black and white.
And you also wouldn't need a Supreme Court to interpret the black and white law.
That's exactly right. I mean, I understand the point that the gentleman was making, but we are necessary because it's not.
Some laws are clearer than others. I think we can say that. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's go to the situation at hand here in Missoula County with the sheriff's office. I struggle when I think about this because I speak with Jason, for example, pretty regularly, and I like the guy. Under Sheriff Jason Johnson, who's now. He ran in the campaign supporting McDermott, and he's a guy that I talk to pretty regularly.
Sure.
Anyway, I like the guy. He does a lot of work in the public, helping out with disabled kids and things like that. And so I try to see things from both sides. So when I think of the issue, if I were Sheriff T.J. McDermott and I got into power, and I only have 3 captain positions to fill, right? As you mentioned, there's only 3, right?
Right.
And so you're constrained by the slots and your resources, and you got to decide what's best for the county of Missoula when you have so many men that are qualified for this captainship
and women.
And no women were captains.
Well, I know, but there are women on the force.
Been,
So yeah,
and
just saying.
A woman undersheriff. So
sorry.
Okay,
go ahead.
Fair enough. But at this point, there weren't any women captains. Right. Anyway, sorry. Not to be gender discriminating or anything, just trying to point out the situation at hand.
Present circumstance.
But when it comes to the situation there, you've got a lot to balance. And so I guess my question is, how do you know that these people were booted out because of their political alliances and not for some other reason?
Not for budgetary reasons.
Or maybe just cohesiveness for the county sheriff's department, for example.
Well, if you can establish good cause to take a negative personnel action against somebody, you're entitled to do that. If you have an open position and you want to promote somebody into that because of you are copacetic with their approach to law enforcement, and everybody prefers working with people they like. They prefer working with their friends, people that they have mutual respect for, and you have an opening, you can promote that person based on that feeling or loyalty or whatever, however you want to characterize it. But you're also constrained by the law. For example, the Montana statute says that you can't demote the undersheriff. Undersheriff Johnson is protected by that now. Mm-hmm. He won't, if there's a new sheriff and he's no longer undersheriff, he's not going to be sent to the night patrol. He's going to go back to his old position as a detective sergeant, or so everybody gets to benefit from these laws, and everyone is constrained by them. And so if the management makes decisions that violate the law, the consequences that flow from that are their responsibility.
Now TJ would say, but I'm not demoting him. He's not a captain because there's only 3 captainship positions, even though one's still open. But he's getting his same pay that he was. There's no fiscal damage here. There's just ego damage.
And then that's another serious question about the management, right? You're gonna pay a captain's salary to a night patrol officer. Is that good husbandry of the resource? You're going to send, for example, Captain Dominic, with all the training, experience, and knowledge that he has, you're going to pay him as a captain to oversee the evidence warehouse. It's a question of how you allocate your resources. Sure.
But for the public's understanding of this issue, can you kind of delineate the difference in pay between a captain and just a regular person on the force?
A deputy.
Yeah, it's substantial. It's not twice as much, but it depends on the seniority of the people. But it's substantial. We're
talking like $70,000 a year.
We're talking about a difference of 20 to 30%. So
okay, this is a lot more.
A lot more, right? And so you can, if you have good cause to demote somebody from captaincy, you should exercise that good cause and get rid of them and get somebody who's qualified in there. But if you don't have good cause and you're constrained by the statute, when you run for office, you realize what Sheriff McDermott knew exactly what his constraints were going to be before he ran for office, and he voluntarily undertook that, knowing what those constraints would be when he got there.
Okay, we're up against a break. We'll be right back. And Marilyn, sorry, she couldn't stay.
Sorry about that, Marilyn.
All 3 lines are open, 721-1290. We have like 8 minutes left in the program. If you would like to visit with our guest, Quentin Rhoades, or talk about this issue, we'll be right back. And we're back on Talkback, only about 7 minutes left of the program, and interesting conversation. I hope it's been illuminating for you. I know there's a lot of confusing things between human rights and civil suits and criminal complaints and all that sort of thing going on, and I'm really glad we have an attorney here to kind of clarify that for us. So,
and I want to ask you now, not as an attorney, but just as a person that lives in Missoula, you know a lot now about the sheriff's department and the inner workings there. What would have to happen at that office just for you to get trust back in the sheriff's department?
Well, I wouldn't say that I don't trust the sheriff's office. The deputies there are highly professional, and sheriffs come and go, and those men and women are out there serving the public regardless. And they go to the academy and they have their standards. And they observe those.
You say that, but you wrote the complaint for Mike Dominic.
Absolutely. I think
and about the last couple paragraphs where it talks about people getting pulled over simply because they look pretty. And, I mean, that's not professional standards.
Sure, there's a problem with the senior leadership. And if, I don't think that you can argue that there's not, given what's happened. I mean, you see what has happened to some of the people with the most training, the most respect, the most experience, and the best record of success, and you see what's happened to them arbitrarily because of political positions that they've taken. That confidence has got to be undermined if, for example, we're willing to break with tradition and statute in order to vindicate a position that's taken by a winning candidate. So, I think there has to be a return to an observation of the law. Certainly, and this kind of situation where the law applies most of the time is not something that I think that can ultimately be tolerated. You can chalk it up to inexperience, you can chalk it up to political differences, but it doesn't seem like law enforcement.
Now, so here's the problem: is that when this is amplified in the media, it makes it appear as though this kind of stuff happens all day, every day, right? It doesn't. Okay, would you agree that the issues involved in these complaints are one or two times, or is it a steady diet of basically improper behavior? In that the bulk of the people, as you had mentioned, people serving on the line, good, honest, law enforcement officers trying to do their best to protect the public, to protect and serve, and every now and then we get a bump on the road and somebody does something wrong.
Well, there's been this pattern that's come out since the first of the year with a variety of people facing these unprecedented sort of personnel decisions and management decisions. And so it's got to be hard on morale for the line officers, the people on the ground, to see all this dissension among their leaders.
They just want to do their jobs.
They just want to do their job, and they want to have confidence that they're being supervised by people and led by people who are competent, well-meaning, and law-abiding. And there's just been very difficult for a matter of months now with respect to trying to figure out exactly what's going on up there and who's, when is the shoe going to drop next? I mean, it seems like there's just a drumbeat of things that happen one right after the other, and hopefully there's an end in sight.
I'm just because I sincerely hope, deep in my heart, that the McDermott administration will be able to pull things together, solve these problems, be able to put it behind them. He's barely into office 6 months, and continue for the next 4 years, and build a positive experience for people. That's my hope.
Well, I think the problem at this point is, some of those bridges have burned, right? You have people that aren't on the force to make amends with. You have people that have what's it called? The Brady law, Brady
list,
write-ups on them. There's a bunch of stuff that's really hard to walk back.
Well, there's amends that can be made, and there's a person can say, look, I made a mistake here, and I'm sorry for that, and I realize what I did wrong, and I'm going to do it differently. That's a soft word turns away wrath, not because it's soft, because it's sincere. And I think that there's an opportunity for that. I hope so.
I wanted to ask real quick. We've both of these complaints that you've been working on, Dominic's and Clark's, are both HR complaints, right?
Right.
A lot of people are wondering if there's going to be any meshing between these complaints and Paige Pavilone's complaint, which actually filed in a regular court. Is there communication between you and Mr. Van de Wettering, who represents Paige Pavilone, on?
Well, there's communication based on the fact that our clients are witnesses in her case, and I'm not sure she's a witness in our cases, but so he's been communicating with us about their status as witnesses in her case.
Her name certainly appears, at least in Dominic's write-up.
Yeah, absolutely, and but I don't think that necessarily that she's personally a witness in the case. The things that are alleged in Dominic's complaint are matter of public record with respect to what happened to her. Some of it's going to have to be proven with witnesses, and she may be one of them. But you can see the people who are being targeted here are not random. There's a group, and there's a reason why that they're on this list of people who are being treated in the way that they're being treated. And so there's a lot of things in common between what happened to her and what happened to some of the others.
Interesting stuff. Well, we got 1 minute left, right?
Yes,
Peter?
we do. So Quentin, wrap up for us. So, what's next in your review with Mr. Clark, and where that goes from here?
Sure. The undersheriff's complaint is now complete. All the documentation has been filed with Human Rights. They're undertaking their investigation. One of their investigators just came off vacation this week, so I expect that will be given his undivided attention now until he comes up with a ruling. There are a lot of witnesses and a lot of documents to review. There are a lot of allegations and counter-allegations, so I don't expect it to necessarily be a quick process.
Now, is this somebody that you will meet with or not?
It's someone who will be meeting with everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, so
All right.
he's got a lot of power to require people to talk to him, and that'll be confidential.
Sure.
But he'll issue some written findings and conclusions that people can.
And listen, do us a favor, keep in touch, okay?
Sure,
Because
my
I
pleasure.
really want to hear how this goes. It's important to the community, and we serve the community as an outlet of information. So
I think it absolutely is important to the community, so we'll definitely
Right.
be in touch.
Thank you very much. Quentin Rhoades, what's coming up on tomorrow's fabulous radio
It's
program?
World Affairs Council Day. We'll be speaking with Job Henning, who runs Grid Energy, and, of course, Bob Seidenschwartz.
Yep, he'll be with us as well. And Rick, I'm so sorry we didn't have time to get your call. I hope you'll call again later.